In this video, we're going to be creating this glass rock explosion effect procedurally inside of Houdini. We'll start by converting our rock into points that we can control, then using MOPS to create a mask falloff, and using that mask to splice our points with a bit of vex and noise to create that awesome organic motion. After that, we'll build our own procedural glass shards and instance them onto the points. Finally, we'll take everything into Solaris for a complete start to finish render with Karma Renderer. There's a bit going on here, so let's jump in.
All right, so first things first, we're going to import our rock. And I just got a rock from Megascans. I believe it was this one here. I just downloaded it and I'm going to load it in here. So create a geometry container. I've already got one here, but imagine you're creating one. And then use a file node to import your rock. It'll probably import in the weirdest way and way too big. So I normally use a match size. So throw down a match size here. It's just going to like center it. Sometimes it shrinks it, sometimes it doesn't. So next we're going to go transform node. Let's rotate it to be how we want it. So let's look and see what axis we're on. Blue, that means the Z axis. Yeah, I want it facing me like this. And let's make this pretty darn small, 0.01. Come down to, if I hold Shift A, it will, if I press Shift A, it will snap me back to the view. And now you can see there's all these different variables. And we don't really need hardly any of them. Don't need really any of these. So let's remove them. We're just going to select what we want to keep. We want to keep the normal. We want to keep the position. And that's probably fine there. On the vertices, we want to keep the UV. And then on this level, I think we are fine. We can just with that and then go delete and unselected. And this just brings the data down a lot and helps Houdini be really quick. So there's a neat little trick. And then we can create a null. I've already got one there and I just rename that to rock out. And there's our beautiful rock. Now, if you press U and we go back up to this viewport, I like to group my nodes based on what's sort of happening. It changes depending on scene, but this is how we're going to do it in this one. Just imports. To create this, you go Shift O, and it's going to create a little box. And if you press C, you can color that whatever you want. And if you double click here, you can type stuff. But I've already got one there. It's called imports. And then I've got another one called build. So create a new geometry node now. So geo, and then call this one FX build. Again, I've already got one. So let's just go into this. All right. So first up, we want to bring our rock in. So object merge. Let's zoom in here. Let's go select our rock. So there's a heap of stuff here just because I've already put a lot in. But let's just go to rock import and then go rock out, accept. And that's just going to bring our rock into this context as well. So we can manipulate the rock again in a different context. Next, what we want to do is create some points scattered inside of this rock. Now, a cool way to do that, go points from volume. I know it's not a volume, but it essentially is. Like it's a rock that has a center. And the point separation here is going to be your main friend. So 0.01 is going to give us a lot of points. Like if we come to this information, yeah, we've got 250,000 points in there. That's pretty good. I reckon we can leave it at that. Now, a little trick I like to do here is create a null. I mean, call it controls. And I like to put things that are going to be useful for me later on. Sometimes I use them multiple times, sometimes I don't, but it's good to have. And I like to color him green. And then come up to this cog here and go edit parameter interface. All we're doing is just creating a custom controller, like maybe in After Effects you're used to seeing like a slider control. It's the same thing. So we want to bring a float across here. Let's call this res because we want it to be the resolution. We put that into the name and label, and there we go. We just have like a slider here called res custom. Well, right click it, copy parameter, then come here, and in our point separation, we can be like paste relative references. And if I press point separation, you can see that I'm driving this with the controls. It's a good way to set things up, especially if you're going to have multiple different points, then they can all be the same, and it's so much easier. Now you can probably see with these points that it looks trippy as hell. That's just because they're all uniform spaced. So let's make them a bit more random. If we change the jitter scale, that'll just scatter them a bit more randomly. The next thing I want to do is this comes to attributes again. And that's, I want to create an ID for each point. And I love to do that whenever I'm using anything particle, is just have an ID that is not the number on the side here, because that can change when you delete points. So let's just do that really quickly. Wrangle. I know this, and I'm just going to call this set ID. A little bit of code, bit of Vex, but it's okay. All we have to do here is go I at ID equals at ptnum. Now, ptnum is an attribute that just inherently exists in Houdini, and what's going to happen, we just have IDs given to all our points. And that just, it's going to come in handy soon, but it's just a quick one that I always like to do, and I like to make sure it's always running in points. Next, let's get into some of the fun. Let's get our MoGraph sort of effectors going on. So next one, drag that. Let's go MOPS, shape. When we come here, let's come to the eye, turn on the viewing for this, which just gives it a nice color. Now we can see there's like a linear fall off happening here with these two squares. We want to turn that into a spherical. You can kind of already see what's going on here. And if I go 0.5, and if I press enter, I'll be able to enter on the viewport. I'll be able to like maneuver it around. And what I'm trying to do here, let's make the inner and outer radius. This just controls the inner circle. So 0.1 maybe, or maybe like 0.15. And you can sort of see maybe what's happening. If you're used to anything with Cinema 4D, we're just creating a mask essentially, or some data that's going onto these points that we can then map. And we can see that data here as MOPS Falloff. It's just a scale between 0 and 1. That when the red exists, that's 1. And when it's blue, it's 0 or purple. Purple, blue? I don't know. That's 0. Now, I want it to be here. Let's maybe come a little bit further forward. And let's just quickly animate this. So I want to animate the translate. And so I want maybe at 48 frames, I want that to be there. So if I just option click translate, it'll set keyframes on all of them. And if I come back to maybe here, 12 frames, let's just like push it off and up and then press translate again. And we're going to see that if I press up on my direction pad, okay, cool. And now while holding that, if I press V, it's going to bring up our animation. And if I just grab all of these, you can see nothing's happening on the Z. So let's just grab these. And then these guys, I want to be like that. So now if I press play, I think that works. Doesn't mean to do this complicated thing ever, but all we're doing is just animating this mask on it. Now, I always love to just add a little bit of noise to it as well, just to break it up. This is way too much noise. So let's go 0.1, 0.1, 0.2. Yeah, it just breaks it up a little bit. Makes it feel a bit more natural and not just a circle, a perfect circle. All right, now we want to use this mask to drive some things, to give us our look, essentially. So let's do that. Now, first, I want to explode things out from the center. I want all the points to just shoot away from the center of our object. So let's do that. And how we do that is using a peak node. And we're going to, what a peak node is, different to a transform node, is it's going to transform everything and move it based on its normal. Now, none of these points have normals yet, so we need to create a normal first. So let's do that. I'm going to go wrangle. I know some more Vex, create N, which is going to be normal. And what I want to do here is need to get a direction from the center. And how you do that is just subtracting the position of the point from another point, and that'll give you a direction, quite simply. Let's go at N, which is normal, equals at P minus the position that we want. In this case, the position that we want it to explode from is 0. But if you wanted this to be something else, and I'll show you how to do that right now, is let's go minus center and then press this close column. We're going to need to create that. So vector center equals And let's go 0 dash 0 dash 0. And then if I turn normals on, we're going to see everything is exploding out. Maybe if I lower the resolution here to 0.5, we can see everything is directing to the middle, which is kind of the same thing if I got rid of this center. It's the exact same thing. It's the position is -0, so nothing can really be subtracted. But where the magic comes in is if I need this position to be anything different. So 1, now it's like really high up, so everything's exploding from a point that's above our rock. Bring it back to 0. And now if you use the peak node that I mentioned before, peak, and specifically when you use soft peak, because we don't want everything exploding out, and soft peak gives us a mask, or the ability to use a mask. So let's turn normals off here. Let's go controls. Let's turn this up to 0.2. This is how we can just control the resolution a bit better. And now if I just go distance here, you can see everything is just going to explode out. It kind of looks like it's just growing. Like there's no real difference to if I use a transform here. But where the magic comes in is if I use our distance metric to use an attribute. Distance attribute is going to be, if we come here, we can see it's called MOPS Falloff. So let's just copy that and put it in distance attribute. And now you can see, especially as I scroll the timeline, that as our circle gets closer, they get pushed out to a new distance away, but outside, getting pushed out, as opposed to like up, down. They're all different depending on where the point is in space, which is really cool. We might not need it as far, so yeah, maybe 0.8. Like it doesn't need to go too far. We just want it to like make sure that it's exploding out. Now I'm going to move this over, and there's another version of all these points being pushed out by our mask that I want to use. And that's going to be our MOPS modifier noise. Now, if we turn that on, by default, when you use a MOPS, it already knows the MOPS Falloff. Depending on where the mask is, it's pushing them into a new position based on a noise, essentially. And if we come down here, we can see our noise. Now I want to puff this up, maybe 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, so it's like pretty intense. Maybe the frequency is 1.5. If I press uniform, it means they're all going to be about the same. It's probably a bit much. Let's turn that back to 1. Let's turn the octaves up to 4, so it's a little bit more complicated. Maybe 1.5, 5.5. Yes, cool. What we also want, because I want this to explode out, but then I want it to like be still morphing and moving. So how we can do that is go time varying. And if I press play, way too much. Let's go 0.1. Yeah, that kind of feels cool. Kind of feels like it doesn't stop, which is good. We can always come here and be like 0.05 if we want it to be slower. Right now, we have 2 different exploding out. This one's okay, but you can see there's a lot of noise going down and into our rock, essentially. But I want this to happen to this stuff. So it's being pushed out, and then it's having the noise added onto it. So it just feels better. I found that when I was doing it, there was less intersection. It made way more sense for me. Now we can come here and mess with the roughness. We can also mess with the offset if we don't like the shape of that noise. Maybe there's too much amp. We don't want it to be like doing too much. Maybe it needs to be pushed out more as well. Maybe we go 1. It's always hard to know. There's a lot of trial and error here, but push and pull in the wrong sort of direction. We can probably turn that into a minus noise if we want. So it kind of goes the other way. I mean, okay. You know what? I'm happy with that. Now, next, what I want to do is, in the original, had like a pulse going over these points. So let's create that. And instead of using a wrangle, let's go into a at VOP, or point VOP we're going to be using on, because we're going to run over points. The cool thing is, if we think about how this is made, and we want like a pulse to go up and across from the center of our geometry all the way up to the end of where our mask is, essentially. So let's do that. Let's think about it. So if we do a bind, now binds is going to bring in an attribute that we need. And we know we need MOPS Falloff. And if I put MOPS Falloff, and we come here, we have all these different attributes. Some we don't need, but we already know MOPS Falloff is a value between 0 and 1. So let's think about what we actually need. So we need another, or a bind export. I want to call this pulse. And I plug this in. There's now going to be an attribute called pulse, which is identical to MOPS Falloff. But what we want to do with the pulse is obviously just get a small amount of that and then push it up and down. So let's first get the movement happening. So we're going to need time. And if we plug that in, we can see that we get a number as it goes on 1 second, and it just keeps going up by second. So we need multiply by constant, and that way we can, 0.1, slow the time down. So now the time is taking a while to increase because it's 0.1 of a second. Now what we need to do is get our MOPS Falloff. And this is where like some fun can come. Let's come back here and turn off MOPS Falloff and turn on pulse so we can see what we're doing. So let's go subtract. Let's subtract MOPS Falloff from time. Let's go here. Let's see what happens there. We can see that the mask slowly goes up. Now, a little trick here to make it like continually loop is I want to subtract the big number, which is the 1 or the 2 or whatever it is, constantly from it. So it's always just going up from 0 to 1 and repeating. Now, how we do that is we get another subtract node and plug that in, and nothing's going to happen. But then if we go floor, now floor is just going to quantize it down. So if it's 0.5, it'll go to 0. But if it's 1.5, it'll go to 1. And that way, I can always subtract the big number from the little number. And let's see what happens here. Now it's going really slow. Let's pump our time back up. Now we can see it's constantly pulsing between 0 and 1. And we can see that here, which is really cool. But we only want a little slither of that because I don't want it to be going in like a massive chunk of emission when we get to that point. So we can use a ramp to really confine that down to a small part. So ramp parameter. And now a weird thing with the ramp parameter is it doesn't work in here. We have to go up a level to do that. So we have to turn this to spline float. And before I do that, I want to get rid of multiply constant, and I want to just go multiply because I want to drive this input. And if I middle mouse click over that, go promote parameter, it's going to go up. And now when I go up here, we can see, and let's go pulse. Let's just call it pulse. And now you can see this ramp, it's gone to 0. But if I bring this back up, we've got exactly what we had before. But this one is our time multiplier that I just had. There we go. Look at that. But what we want to do is maybe create some more points. Go from here to here, and then this one can come down. Now what we're doing now is we're creating a little line that goes up. Now it's not a very big line, but it's a line. And if I got rid of our noise modifier here, it might look a bit neater. But that's kind of the pulse. We can edit this if we need, or if this is too fast, we can always come back. I have a suspicion that it is too fast, so I'm going to do this. And now you can see we have a heap of points all through the middle. I don't really want any of those ones where our MOPS Falloff isn't, and especially with that pulse, because it's going to flash that whole chunk in one go, because that's where the mask is 0, and it all flashes on when the floor counter keeps hitting it. So now it's time to blast and get rid of this stuff. So let's go blast. Blast is just a delete node. And what we want to do is at MOPS, well, we already have this thing up, copy and paste, greater than, well, just equals 0. And we always have to select points, otherwise it won't work. And now it's going to delete where our points are 0. That's looking pretty cool. And now here's the importance of IDs, because you can see our ID number no longer matches our point number. All right, so now it's time to copy some cool geometry to our points here. So let's do that. Let's come back out. Let's create this geometry first, though. So I've got a shards create already, but let's go to geometry node and let's do this again. Shards underscore create 2 for me. Let's open this up. What we're going to do is get a cube. Let's go hide other objects. Thank you. I just want to have a look at this cube. And then what we want to do is fracture. I want a Voronoi Fracture. Now this needs points to be able to create the fracture. So what we're going to do is ISO, which is just kind of like going to give us a volume, I guess, cloud of the cube. And then we're going to scatter some points. So, I mean, we probably could do something similar to scatter points from volume, but we're just going to do it a different way. This is how I seen it done somewhere. I can't even remember where. Let's scatter about 40 points. And we can relax iterations. We can change the seed, whatever. And then we put those points into a Voronoi Fracture. And then that fractures our geometry like so. Now, if we really want, we can select all the shards that we want. We can automate this, and who doesn't love a little bit of automation? So let's go group. Always love making things procedural. Let's call this group inner, and that didn't change the name of the group, so inner in the group name. And we want this to run on points. Before we do this, we need to pack so that each object gets created as its own. Now, if I come to Voronoi Fracture, we can see that piece gets created. Then if I come into here, it's packing it as one giant object, but we want to use name. And if you come to primitives, we can see that our thing gets name, and all these pieces get given a name. And if I go pack based on name, we now get a heap of different points. And if I come here to explode view, which is just a real cool way to explode out pack geometry, we can see we have a heap of different pieces, and they're all packed. So what we can do here is now we put this on points, the group. I got it wrong before. Let's come back here. Let's go based on bounding regions. And then let's go blast, because we don't want to delete the geometry that's not in our bounding. So come on, group, inner, delete, and unselected. Now you can see everything's here. And if we explode view out, we can see it's the same. But as we shrink this to like 0.5, and this is going to give us 4 shards. They look kind of cool. And if we want to come to Voronoi Fracture, or maybe a scatter, change our global seed, we can see we get whatever points we want. Now what we want to do, quickly, is give each of them a number, an index number. So let's come to a wrangle, and we're going to run over points, and let's say I at index number, which this is going to be kind of like an ID, but I want it to be an index because I want all these bits of geometry to be scattered over the points differently. So equals at pt num. I also want to make all these guys get put to the center. So in this same wrangle, we can do that. At p equals 0. There they are. And we have, 5 bits of packed geometry. Now let's come here and go null. Let's go shards out. Let's go back to our points. What we want to do is a copy to points node. But before that, we need to give each of these objects an index number. This will make sense, actually, if I go, let's go to copy to points. Now, we want that to go into the points section. Nothing is going to happen because we need to bring in our object merge because we want to bring in those shards. Let's bring in these new shards, shardy out, and then scatter them on our points. See what happens. Chaos ensues. So, first, what I want to do now is set some attributes to control this. And we need to do that on the points. So let's do that. Let's come down here. Let's move our push stuff down. And then I want to go attribute create. And I want to set the size of these. So this attribute is going to be called p scale. And p scale is now going to be 0. But if I go 0.1, we're going to see, cool. All these guys are about that size, maybe 0.05. Cool. We're setting the p scale just as is. We also want to create some randomness to that. So attribute randomize. It's set default to color, but let's go p scale create. But I like to do this with a multiply. So we can come to like 0.7 and maybe like 1.2. That's only 1. So 1 dimension we want that on. And something's happening. And this is where the importance of IDs come in, especially with an attribute randomize. So let's hide this attribute randomize. Come to options, seed attribute ID. So let's try this one to be about 0.5. You can see it's really hard to tell what's going on, but there is a bit of randomness to these points between 0.5 and 0.1. If I put after, let's get to be able to see the randomness a bit better. So let's go 1.2. Now let's move all these down. And I'm sure you can already see something that's going wrong here. They're all facing the same direction. So let's just create some random rotation to that. So randomize, and then let's turn this to orient. And if you do orient, Houdini already knows what that means. But we have to make orient here to be direction or orientation. And that also has to be a 4. And then when you do those things, it works. But what's going to happen is as points get blasted, you're going to see the rotation start to mess up. So we have to make sure that that ID is set as well. And again, the next thing, you can see that they're all the same. It's a geometry being copied onto one point. We have to fix that. So let's do it. If you remember, we gave all our shards an index number. So let's reference those index number on each point. So let's create a wrangle again. I know, I'm sorry, a bit more vex, but let's call this index random. You just have to work a little bit harder in Houdini to get some of these things working, but that's okay. What we want to do is I at index equals or rand at ID. Now that's just going to create a random value between 0 and 1. We can already see it, index. And because it's a integer, you're only going to see 0. But what we want to do is fit that in between 5 different elements. So fit that number that is currently between 0 and 1, and I want to fit it between 0 and 5, close brackets. Now, if I click here, we're going to see we have 4 as the highest and 0 as the lowest. And I have to do between 0 and 5 because 5 is the roof and it will never hit 5. So it's not 5 that it's ever going to get to 5, if that makes sense, but that's what we get. And you can see nothing's happening yet because what we have to do is use this piece attribute. And then it's not name, it's index. Boom! Look at that. We get a unique shard on every single point. And now that we have these shards in place, I can kind of see that they're a bit too chunky. So that's where we can come back to our p-scale and be like 0.04. And that kind of looks good. And maybe the random p-scale, is that enough? I think that works well. And now one more bit of housekeeping that I always love to do as well is attribute randomize, not CD, but this one's just going to be called rando. And I want it to be a 1-dimension value between 0 and 1. We come here, you can see rando. We just have a value between 0 and 1. Cool. And that'll come in handy in our texturing. And we obviously have to make sure that the randomize is on seed attribute as well. So we get that random number on. And one more bit of housekeeping. Let's go attribute delete because there is a lot that we don't need here. So what I like to do is come here and just select what I want to keep. Normal, sure. Position, yes. Rando, ID, index, MOPS Falloff, orient. I think I want everything. Pulse, non-selected. There we go. Actually, let's keep scale. All right, just quickly, when I watch the animation of these, none of them rotate as they are being spat out. So how we can do that is similar to the noise modifier. We can come to MOPS, randomize, and I want it to use, it's using our ID, I want it to use our MOPS Falloff still, and I want to randomize our orientation. Now this might be a bit too much, so I can plug it down to 0.5, and now we're going to see as they go out, they rotate a bit. Now we're sort of there. Let's bring our rock back into the equation, because at the moment, it's just a whole heap of points that will get deleted as they go away. For our rock, we want to cut it away as it gets exploded out into points, essentially. So let's do that. Let's bring this here, turn that into a null, just so we have something to look at. There's our rock. We want to bring this MOPS Falloff onto our rock, so attribute transfer. We've already done the work, so let's just bring it across. Here we go. And let's have a look at MOPS Falloff. Look at that. Just go straight on to our geometry. If you're using something else, like maybe a cube or something instead of this rock, you just make sure you have enough subdivisions to be able to copy our MOPS Falloff onto, because if this is just a cube with nothing, it doesn't have enough geometry to copy that MOPS Falloff to. A little tip for you. Now let's cut this away depending on where that noise is. So we could use a blast node, similar to what we do with the points, but that looks a bit gross, so let's do it a bit nicer. And this is using a cool little trick that I love to use all the time. And so let's just say rest. We want to set our rest position. V at rest equals at P. This is going to give all our position a rest geometry. But we want to turn all the points into at T. So the position is now going to be equal to at MOPS Falloff. And then we're going to see what happens here. It turns into a line being shot off into the distance. So that's because every part of our position is being turned into this. We don't really want that. I want P.Y to only have that effect. But that means I need to go at P equals, and I just need to zero it out. So now it's just a line that goes up. Let's create another quick little wrangle to return it to its normal position. So at P equals at rest. And now it's like nothing ever happened. Let's go clip node, because it's a beautiful node, and put it here. Currently clip node is facing to the left. Let's go upwards. And then if I drag this up, you can see it starts to eat away at our geometry. And depending on where it is, will depend on how much it eats away. So go 0, distance I can go like 0.01. This is kind of the same effect as pulling it upwards. And let's turn this into minus. So the direction is the other way around, minus. And we can see it's been eaten away. And now let's come down here, create a null, and say rock animation underscore out. And there's our rock animation out. Let's merge this with our copy to points so we can see both at the same time. This is just for viewing, but merge packed is how I like to do this. There we go. And we can see if it works. Sometimes we might need to pull our geometry up a little bit, maybe even 0.025, so it eats in a little bit. Looks a little bit nicer. Now we can see as it goes away, the geometry gets eaten. Now a little bit of housekeeping. Let's clean this up. So at delete, we don't need that rest anymore. So let's get rid of it. And I don't even think we need MOPS Falloff anymore. So let's get rid of them. And then now we're going to bring everything over to Solaris. Now before that, we're going to be using the points instead of our copied geometry. Just because Solaris is fun and can be a pain when doing this. So let's just turn this into a null. So we have somewhere, and let's go shards underscore PTS underscore out. There we go. And the merge pack there is just for visual reference, if you will. And then I like to come here and make them green as well. Now I also want to increase our point count to maybe a 0.15. I want to add some velocity to these points. So let's create a trail SOP and then just turn this to compute velocity. Let's jump over to Solaris now and get this all lit, textured, and rendered. So first, let's come over here. Let's go SOP import. I'm going to do this in a way that is as beginner friendly as possible while still having enough scene structure to be perfect for a project. Let's go SOP import. Let's call this rock. Let's go and load that rock. We want the rock animation. Let's come here. We want rock animation out, I believe was the one. Cool. That's just going to bring our rock in here with all its gross. Next is doing the instance up in Solaris, which is kind of just like redoing the copy to points, and it can be a bit of a pain, but this is dealing with Solaris, so I'm just going to run you through it quickly. Let's go instancer, and let's just call this shards instance. Let's double click it. Let's go object merge. Let's go find our cheeky little shard points that we did. And I believe that was shard points out. Then we can come back out. You can't really see anything yet because what we have to do is put our shards in. So let's go SOP import and let's just call this shards geo. Let's import them. Oops, we have to go to our shards create. Shard, that's right. And if we put that in there, You can see they get copied, but I mean, they all get copied. So that's because we need to come to primitive definition, pack primitives, unpack. And that should just give all our geo here. Still doesn't do anything because we have to create a collection. Now, one annoying thing about Houdini is you are constantly having to type way more than you would like to. We're going to give this collection a name. Let's call it Shards. And then we have to tell it what pieces of geometry are going to be in the collection. Just delete this, drag this guy in here. And then we have to do / star. And that's just going to put everything into our collection. And then we need to come back to our instancer and our prototype primitives. We're just going to delete that. And we're going to come down here and go collection shards. Now you can see we have some things copied, but at the moment it's just random and we don't want that. We gave it specific index. So let's go index attribute and it's going to use index already. And that's just going to give us, let's put these together. The way I like to do that is with a reference node. Let's break that. Let's bring it into the little fat import part. And let's bring them both in. And this is where you have to type a little bit. But let's go rock / rock. Genius, right? And then for the shards, let's go rock / shards. And this just means in our tree, we have rock. And then underneath rock, we have the actual rock geo and the shards. And this is just a nice way to work because with a reference node, you can cache this out to disk and it all works and it maps it properly behind the scenes. I'm not going to get into right now, but it's a good way to work. Let's also add in a cyclorama to give us a bit of a background to render this against. So let's go create this time because we don't have that. Plug that in here. And I'm just going to call this VG. And then you can see VG's existing here now. So let's go and create this cheeky little way that I like to create a cyclorama. Let's create a cube before. Let's create a cube. Let's go blast. And then if you come in select here and make sure this is on primitives, we can come and just go. And there we go. We've got this guy. And we can make this like 5. You can make it sort of whatever you want. 0.5. So it's on the ground. And then we can come here and go bevel. Before we do that, we just have to go reverse. Just to flip that geometry around for us. Create a nice cheeky little bevel like this. Give it like 5 divisions. Cool thing is we can make this like super long. Pretty near that long. But we can chuck a little transform in here and just scale it up. And I know our rock is in the center. So let's just transform this down a bit too. There we go. Now if I come back, put a cyclorama. Let's make this bigger. And if you want a more steady fall off on the ground, we can do that by just coming to our bevel and upping the divisions, upping the distance. I'm just going to bring this down a bit more too, at -1. All right, let's get this prepped and ready for some rendering. So I'm going to come down here and go camera 2, and you can see this camera is just here. Let's bring this guy back to where our geometry is, and then we can go look through camera 2. And you can probably do like, maybe let's come to 12. Cool. Let's go like 0.5. No, maybe like 0.2. And now let's go karma setup. Don't need to worry about that for the moment, but we do need to make sure that the camera's correct. And it's just camera 2 here, so it should be good. Let's turn this to XBU. And now you can look through here and we have, and cool, here's karma. But there's a new way of working in karma in Houdini 20 that I am going to show you, and that's the live render. So let's turn back to normal viewport. And I've got like this extra little viewport here that just kind of splits it into 2. And how you do that is to come up here and go split plane left, right. And then I have render gallery here. You can see these ones with the green dot. If we come here and go live render and just click it, we just have to set the render settings. And then if we go start render, it should start rendering. And there it is. And this is just the image plane, something you might be more familiar with Octane and Redshift. That way we can keep that over here just viewing while we work in this pane. Next up, I guess I want to add some materials. So let's do that. Let's go material library and let's create some Karma material builders. I want 3 because we have the shards, the rock, and the background. we come to material library, we get autofill materials, and then assign geometry to all of them. And now we can drag all our stuff over here. So back on here, we'll be able to see this take place. So let's have a look. Let's go into rock. Now, I already have some textures for this, and I'm going to bring them over now until image, and let's call this CD. And if I come into this file name and paste, I want to bring let's copy that into our base color, and it's brown. So it takes a little second to update. Let's copy this, call this N for normal. And let's get our normal LED, plug this into a normal map, and then into our geometry, normal. This is the one. Sometimes it's hard to know which one is the live viewer, but apparently it's this one. Dimensionality to our rock. Now this rock is just way too brown, and also that normal is not color, it's a vector 3. And what I want to do is color correct that, because I want our rock to be pretty dark. Maybe even like 0.2. And as the rock is super shiny, I want this rock to be rough. And I think I want the saturation to come down as well. And if I wanted some displacement as well, we can duplicate this. Let's go displacement. Let's grab that displacement, pipe that straight into displacement. You can see chaos on shoes. It's all about just finding size. It's probably going to be enough displacement. And now let's just quickly do our background as well. I want it to be maybe a little bit darker and also a hell of a lot rougher. Now for our shards, which are not showing up here. So sometimes you just need to restart your... Oh, that's on CPU. Make sure you turn that to XPU as well. Stop render and start again. Now I want these shards to be a nice blue. Like, let's grab a blue somewhere here. But I want them to be transmissive. So let's turn that color into, come to constant. Let's grab color. Let's do that same thing. I just kind of want somewhere here. And I want that to be plugged in for transmission color. So let's go transmission color. And let's turn transmission so we get some nice glass. Now, I don't want our transmission to be all just like this one blue color. I want a lot more variation. And the cool thing is we gave all our single elements in this a random object number. So let's do that. So let's go primvar. I want it to be a float. And if you can't remember what it was, you can always come here. And if you're clicking on your shards, we'll scroll all the way down, and here's all the primvars that we've been brought in. I call this rando with a capital R, so rando. And that's going to be a random number between 0 and 1. So if I come to a color correct node, plug that in between our color, and then we have hue. And if we plug this in, it's going to be chaos, man. It's going to be like every color under the sun because the hue's shifted all around. We don't want that. So we can remap 0 to 1 to between minus 0.1 and 0.1. Now we're going to get some random colors near the color that we've chosen. And if you don't want that much of an extreme, maybe you can be like 0.05 and maybe feels just a little bit more random. Another thing I want to do is when the glass gets closer to the rock, I want it to be kind of like the rock. And the cool thing is another primvar. So let's copy that. Let's delete this inputs. Get out of the way. And I believe we have MOPS Falloff. So MOPS underscore Falloff. We want that to be plugged into the transmission. We're going to need another remap node. And let's plug that into the transmission itself. And it should be going between 0 and 1. But we want to bring the input down to maybe 0.1. And it's blue. I want this to be black. So there we go. We can see that those ones right at the edge there, the transmission gets turned off, essentially. Now, another thing I want to do is that blast, that pulse blast that I created, I want that to be an emissive texture. So let's do that again. So another primvar, pulse, and I want that to go into our emission. So I'm going to need another remap node just to give me a little bit more control, which is good. It should be between 0 and 1 again. Then we want to go into our emission. There we go. But I want that to be colored a different color. And so I can come here, go down to our emission. Let's actually make this color is purple. So when it's emissive, it comes off as this purple. All right, so now we have textured everything. I also just quickly need to go render geometry settings. This is a fun thing about Karma is the emissive textures aren't really emissive until you tell them to be. So we have to come here and then we have to select our geometry up here, which is our shards, rock shards. And then we want to come to Karma under light, and then we want efficient emission. So set. Yes, so we want it to actually be an emissive texture, so it actually lights the scene. And now it's time for some lighting. So let's create some lights. So area light, and this is going to be key light. And the cool thing with Houdini is you can come here and select look through light, key light. And then if you press the lock, we are then looking through our light. And let's come here. Let's make the size about 2 because we want it to be big and soft. And let's go key light. Let's turn this up to like, I don't know, 5. Let's actually go to a part of the scene where there is no particles. And let's just light this guy. I kind of want him to be off to the side. I want the light to be like wrapping around, catching a little bit here and there. I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe we can even pump that up to 6. I just want enough shadow that there's a bit of definition there. And one thing I do like to do is go from rectangle to disc. It just makes it feel a bit more natural. Let's create a new light. This one's going to be the fill light. Let's go look through our fill light. Let's turn key light off and come over here. I want the fill light to be maybe a lot less bright. Like I just want it to be like filling in some of the shadows in the other spot. So I want it to have a bit of definition as well. And if I turn back the key light and then be turning both off, it's kind of hard to tell, but it just like gives a little bit more light in that area. Let's turn this one and let's call this rim light. Let's make it tiny, like 0.25. And I also want to look through the rim light, turn all other lights off. If you just highlight them and press B or bypass them. And let's turn this up to like, I don't know, 9. Maybe even 10. So I don't need it to be like a tiny light. And then I'm going to come around the back, essentially. And I want the edge of right there. And then let's have a look what it looks like when there's particles in the scene. There we go. Ooh, that looks so nice. I love transmission materials. Let's turn all our other lights on. Right, that's looking good. I think our rock needs to be a bit darker. So let's come back to the rock. Let's bring down the gain to like 0.1. Maybe in like 0.05. Now this is looking really good. There's one more light I do want to add. And that's just for our background. So let's just copy our key light again. Key 1. Which, let's enter and we can sort of like bring it closer. I just wanted to light the background a little bit. Not really hit much of like 7. Alright, cool. There's a lot of light going on. So maybe actually we go light, linker. And I just don't want, let's call it BG light. I just don't want that BG light to really affect anything else. So let's go BG light. I only want it to affect our background. So now it's not really affecting our shards. There's enough light there anyway, right? And if I really want, I could be like, do the same for maybe like our rim light and maybe a key light. And I only want those to affect. And there we go. It's looking pretty cool, if you ask me. Let's get a frame where maybe there's some emissive materials as well. Again, sometimes the particles just decide they don't exist, which is fun. So we know what we need to do. Stop render, start render again. There we go. And there's some emission. Let's come to render settings. I want to turn this down to maybe 64, just so we get it a bit quicker. Okay, so let's get this guy set up for rendering. So if we go into our camera settings, I'm going to change this path trace samples down to 64. Let's go to filters and turn our denoise on. It's going to denoise our viewer here. I'm going to change some of our settings. So if we come to limits, this is what it is by default. I want to turn off subsurface because we don't have any in the scene. Refraction limit's 4. We can maybe bump that up to 5. And one other thing I need to do is let's look at some depth of field. Let's see what happens when we go to 1. 0.1. We'll really see the depth of field. You can see it's focused on here and everything else is a little bit blurry. You know what? 2's probably fine here. And next, let's go to our motion blur. So let's go to a shot where there is, well, way more motion there on frame 38. Let's tune that down quite a lot. So what I like to do is change the shutter close and open. they have to match but be opposite. So copy parameter, paste relative references, but make that minus. And if I click it, minus 25, but let's go minus 0.05. Like a little bit of motion blur, 0.01. Like the smallest amount of motion blur, not too much. Can be quite hard with the denoiser on, so sometimes I like to come and turn the denoiser off, especially when doing motion blur. Should be able to see on here. We also have to come to our camera effects and make sure velocity blur on instances is on, and velocity blur here. Bit too much, so yeah, I think 0.02 is going to be about the right amount. I don't want it to look crazy, I just want it to look natural. Cool. Once we get this to a point we like, we can come over and do some slight compositing. I'm just going to do that all inside of Houdini here. Now for the original, I did a lot more compositing, but I'm just going to show you some basic tricks. So let's get rid of the live viewer, come back here, turn on XView. And you know what? I'm really not liking this backlight. So let's turn this down to like 2. I want it to be quite dark, I think. Why not? It's going to accentuate the color in our shards. Next I want to do is create a COP network. This is kind of like image processing, post-processing. I was going to call it SLAP. It's always a funny name. And then if I come in here and go SLAP comp block, there we go. And if I go add OVs, and then come to the end here, come back and click this guy. Make it SLAP comp. Can't see anything yet. If we come in here, we can see we now have our scene as a flat image. Now it's not rendered, so I'm just going to let this render a lot more, and I'm going to turn back on our denoiser. And now this looks confusing, but all it is just processing in a block for whatever reason. But one thing I like to do is a little glow, and you just put that on the C. And we can already see it working its magic. Maybe I want the threshold to be a little bit higher. The brightness to maybe be about there. Saturation down a little bit. Maybe I just want it to be a bit bigger. And if I really want, I can add a second glow here with like 0.5, just that big. And the brightness down quite a lot. Now if I turn that on and off, it's a little bit hard to tell. Maybe it needs to be like 0.2. Okay, and then we turn the brightness down. That's looking pretty nice. And then if we want, we can also add some other adjustments. In color, we have bright and clamp and remap and threshold. Using a remap, which kind of essentially just a curves node. And I can come in here and turn this to V-spline. And then just add a few more. You want to push the brightness up, pull the darkness down just a little bit. Cool, so we went from here to here. Looks pretty good. And yeah, obviously you can do a lot more compositing to get it looking how I had it in the final image, breaking up different parts and that, but I feel this gives this a pretty decent look, and you can go and play with this and render it out however you like with more passes and all those different things. So cool, enjoy.